The North Carolina pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across our state. The pork industry contributes more than $10 billion a year to our state's economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs, primarily in small rural communities across eastern North Carolina. Learn more at ncpork.org. The North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner for the North Carolina Sports Network.
He's always fun to pick his brain on baseball and other things in the sports world, including the city of Boston, where he helped lead the Red Sox to the 2004 World Series championship, breaking the curse of the Bambino once and for all. He almost played for the NC State Wolfpack as a collegian. Trot Nixon is joining us on the David Glenn Show. Trot, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm very good, David. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. How did you get through that speech a year ago? My eyes could well up just thinking about your Hall of Fame speech as you thanked your mom and dad and family, your beautiful wife and children nowadays. I know you don't like talking about yourself. How'd you do that?
No, and honestly, it was made easy because of the people that have been in my life, you know, and then obviously my mom and dad, brothers, and my brother and two sisters. The support they had for me, just constant support. Obviously, my wife and two kids, you know, through my professional days and even, you know, post-professional days. And a lot of it had to do with, you know, my friends and coaches. My friends most of the times were my teammates, and I'm a firm believer that, you know, coaches do a great job of molding, you know, ball players, and their friends allow them to continue to push, you know, for whatever they want, greatness or to be competitive. And I think that was a big part of my life. Not only was, you know, my dad very instrumental, but also had Joe Miller as a football coach and Dave Brewster as a baseball coach. And these guys, you know, just molded me into what I was. And if it wasn't for my teammates, you know, I probably wouldn't have been in certain places that I was.
Trot Nixon joining us on the David Glenn Show. Pretty cool that still to this day, I mean, you're only a 39-year-old guy, for crying out loud. It sounds like a baby to me, but your new Hanover teammates from back in the day at Wilmington, you guys still get together every once in a while. Trot also does great work with the institution that he is now a member of, the Greater Wilmington Sports Hall of Fame. Remember that auction, the Josh Hamilton signed baseball, the Johnny Manziel signed football. The auction going on right now at gwshof.com. Remember, that's the website for the Greater Wilmington Sports Hall of Fame. We thought of you, well, we usually think of you for really positive reasons, including World Series titles and other things, your intense style of play. We thought of you more recently for sad reasons, the Boston Marathon tragedy. You lived and breathed the city of Boston for a long time. Everybody who closes their eyes and thinks of you sees you in a Boston Red Sox uniform. What were your thoughts when you not only heard about the Boston Marathon explosions, but it started to register that this was Patriots Day up there? And I'm sure you laced them up on, 11 o'clock in the morning at Fenway Park on plenty of day leading into the Boston Marathon.
Well, a buddy of mine, Nick, I'm good friends with, contacted me and asked me if my wife was running in the race this year. And I was like, no, she's not running this year. And because she's done several things for the Dana-Farber Institute and tried to fundraise money for cancer research and running for their marathon team. And I told him no. And he said, did you hear what happened? And, like everybody else, I kind of rushed around the city to find out what happened, get in front of a TV. And, there's a lot of emotions that went through, my wife and myself. A lot of emotions ran through us. A lot of it for me was anger. Didn't know what it was. Didn't know why this happened. Is it what they're saying was happened? My immediate thought was, just recently we had a marathon down here in Wilmington, and Dave, who runs the Boston Marathon, who puts it together every year, he was actually the guest speaker down here, and I got to spend about a half hour with him. And, I thought about him and what he's going through right now and what the runners are going through, just the physical and mental strain that you have to run a marathon, and then this happened. And it was tragic. I mean, it was, to this day, it kind of angers me, and I think, I'm not the only one that feels that way, obviously, but, I also called the Red Sox organization to make sure that everybody that they had was okay, accounted for, and they hadn't heard of a couple people, but they eventually, called in some of the people that work in the organization that were running. Obviously, where it happened wasn't too far away; it's a few miles away from Fenway. And at Fenway, at one of the Fenway stops, is where a lot of the Dana-Farber kids with cancer, set up so that when these runners who are running for Dana-Farber, when they run by and they're hitting that wall and they can't fight anymore, they can't go, they see these kids, and then it pushes them to the finish line. And so, it wasn't too far from there. But what stood out the most to me was that commercial with the Marines. I use it as our military guys. They run towards the sounds of tyranny.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you saw with first responders, the police officers, people working with the Boston Marathon, even runners running to find out to help, do whatever they could. And, like we've heard on the news time and time again, if it wasn't for a lot of those people, there's been probably more casualties in this whole process. And that epitomizes Boston. It did the same thing in New York, because that was near and dear to my heart, because my son was born on 9/11.
Right. And
I was in the air that day also when the planes went into the towers. And but it just shows you it couldn't have been even any better when you see that big B for the Red Sox and strong underneath, because that's that city. That's the way they've been from day one. That's a strong, gritty town. They expect that from their sports teams, from the Celtics to the Pats to the Sox, the Bruins, and even the Revolution. And they're a gritty group of people. They're the best fans that any professional athlete could ever want or have. I was very spoiled by them. And, yeah, it hurt, because even though I'm from Wilmington, North Carolina, grew up here, I love this city, I love, being here, my wife and I say, that's home also.
Yeah.
And it was a difficult process. And, the more we see it, the men and women of the police departments, the FBI and all that stuff are tracking these guys down. And one of them was put away, and another one is in custody. And hopefully we can get down to the bottom of this. Sounds like they're doing it, but couldn't be any more proud to say, those first responders, even though I may have known somebody, may have met somebody, I don't know, but that just epitomizes Boston as a city, that, they rush right into it. Doesn't matter whatever is going on. They're there to help. They're there to, finish the fight. And, and that's just what they did.
Really well put. Trot Nixon joining us on the David Glenn Show. He wore that Red Sox uniform in the major leagues from 1996 for a little cup of coffee all the way through 2006. Hey, given the way you just sort of described that as your second home, the city of Boston, you've done so many great things in sports. I'm not sure which memories are sort of vivid and which just sort of blend together. But if I remember correctly, you were purposely pulled from a game that I think most people knew might end up being your last game with the Boston Red Sox. And, man, you were beloved for that dirt dog stuff and your style of play and some of the same grit that you just used to describe the city itself. Do you have vivid memories of trotting off the field as basically Red Sox Nation was giving you a career thank you on your way out the door?
Yeah, I do. And, that was a difficult day because it was the last game of the season. We were playing the Orioles, and it was raining. It was just miserable weather. My youngest son, we're having his birthday party. It's supposed to have been early that evening, but it ended up getting pushed back even later. But she didn't care as long as he got cake. But, so, I mean, and I do remember that, and I do really appreciate it because the weather was awful. And for all the people that hung around, that was their love for the Red Sox. And, for giving me the standing ovation, the one that really, meant the most was, the Red Sox. I played for the Indians one year, and the Red Sox had just beat us in Game 7 of the AL Championship. They did a fantastic job. They came back, beat our best pitchers, beat CC, beat Carmona. And as I was walking with my buddy, David DeLucci, out through the guts of the stadium pretty much, there was just lines of fans that were still there. And, they just, it just goes to show how much I love these guys
for
hanging around and just, basically giving me an ovation, clapping through there. I didn't know what to say, shook a lot of hands and so forth, but, I tried to do everything I possibly could as a ball player for that city. I represented not only myself and my family, but also represented the Boston Red Sox organization. And I wanted to do it the right way. I wanted to play the game, as hard as possible. I wasn't great. I didn't have great numbers and all that stuff, but I knew that whether I was, hurting or injured or what, I was paid to do a job, and, I tried to do it the best of my ability. There's a lot of times where I probably should have sat out games, maybe extended my career a little bit, but that just wasn't in my DNA, and it never was. But I pass on to these newcomers that are coming up to be careful with their bodies and so forth and don't really push the limit, but it was just something where that's what I want to do. I love being on the field. I love competing, and a lot of it had to do, it was a lot of the way I was brought up, but also had a lot to do with those people who were sitting in the seats and who lived who live in Red Sox Nation. That's who I wanted to play for. So, there's a lot of memories. The World Series, the biggest thing of them all, obviously, breaking that curse.
Yeah.
Just a magical time. It seemed like everything was in fast forward during the playoffs. It felt like we won 2 World Series by beating the Yankees the way we did, coming back, being down 3-0. And then I really honestly don't even remember much about the Cardinal series because it was over just as quick as it started. Not to say that the Cardinals weren't a good team,
sure.
But we had so much momentum. It was just, it was great. And then the parade to experience that was like none other.
Trot Nixon is joining us on the David Glenn Show. He is that 2004 World Series champion as a member of the Boston Red Sox. You brought up a lot of really good examples of the positives that have come out of this Boston tragedy. You mentioned the first responders, law enforcement, the whole Boston Strong logo. There's one other cool thing that I don't know if you've read about or seen, but Sweet Caroline. And I've been at Fenway and I've sung the words myself, even though I'm a Phillies fan and not a Red Sox fan. When you were warming up back in the day, and I think most people know now, other sports franchises, as a show of solidarity with Boston and Boston sports teams, are playing Sweet Caroline during breaks in action, not just of baseball games, but other sports too. I always wanted to know, when you were out there warming up at Fenway, did you ever want to sing along with Neil Diamond? Did you ever want to say bump, 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 bum, or did it just become background noise after all those years?
Well, it wasn't really background noise because, over the years, it started to take a life of its own. First few years, it was just a song out there. A few fans would be singing it, but then all of a sudden, it became like, wasn't why they came there.
Yeah.
They got loud for it. And, and I remember, Nomar would always, I called him Nomi, obviously. I was getting ready to say Nomi. You probably wouldn't know it. Nomi would always sing it. He'd always love hearing it. I always loved hearing it. You'd always, when it got to that, bump, dun, dun, the fans just got loud, you just stuck your hand up in the air and just like you're orchestrating, a concert with these guys. And they love it, and yeah, it's been great, hearing it. It was great hearing it at Yankee Stadium. It's a great tribute. But and then seeing Neil Diamond, there in person and just listening to, he just hops on a flight from the West Coast and, calls the switchboard like I probably would, just call the Red Sox and says, "Hey, I'm Neil Diamond. Mind if I come in?"
Yeah.
So you're, and then Sarah McKenna, who I speak with quite a bit, Catherine and I do, she's like, puts it all together, gets them on the field, and just another tribute to Boston. It's that song has developed a life of its own. It's a mainstay. It's electric when you hear it in the stadium. Obviously, it's been magnified even more from the recent tragedies. But going to Fenway Park, get an opportunity to, it's one of the best, if not the best venues to go to, just because, it's a historic park, obviously, a great ball club. The organization's done a great job of putting a great product on the field and then a great, product to sit in, as far as an old stadium. So my favorite seats are the monster seats. And You're probably not going to sing it because
your voice is better than mine, brother. I promise you would sound better than I would.
Come on.
Trot Nixon could sing this one better than I could. Hey, we did want to ask you one more thing, and good work there, Hayes, digging that out. I could listen to that song all day. It's a famous story, and I know I've asked you to tell it probably 10 times. But 20 years ago this summer, there were a lot of NC State Wolfpack fans envisioning you in an NC State football uniform after what you did at New Hanover in that sport, and even an NC State baseball uniform in their dream scenario. What do you remember about how close it was, that offer from pro baseball, as you were, I don't know, a day away from playing for the NC State Wolfpack?
First of all, I did see that 8 o'clock class that I had the night before I signed that contract, but it really, that wasn't the reason why. But I was like wondering, I'm like, wow, I got an 8 o'clock Wago, starting off my first year. But, it was a tough decision. My childhood dream was to be a professional baseball player. And believe me, and all the teachers had the right to say this, do you know the percentages of someone making it to the highest level? And I'm saying, I don't know what they are, but that's what I want to do. And for me to be able to live out my dream was one thing, but I also wanted to compete and play at the highest level in college football at NC State, playing football and baseball for two great, coaching staffs, Ray Tanner and his staff, and then Coach Sheridan and his. I was really looking forward to it. I felt like I fit in perfectly with both the football and baseball team, from the things that we did offensively at New Hanover High School, and then obviously, getting on the field and playing baseball with Coach Tanner. But if it would have happened nowadays, I don't know if it would have changed much, but it really hurt when Coach Sheridan retired that summer.
Yeah.
I was still all in for State. I wasn't having second guess. I wasn't saying, I'm definitely playing baseball. But when Coach O'Kane became the head coach, I lost that I felt like that mentor that I had been speaking to for years through the recruiting process. He was going to be my quarterback coach for the next, ever how many years I planned on playing if I didn't play baseball. And I lost that.
Yeah.
And in that process, some coaches will still work with positions, but he felt an obligation to the whole team, and I understand that. But that was difficult because the coach that they had coming in there, I really didn't have a rapport with. And so, that made that whole process extremely difficult. I really wanted to play. I was excited about being out there in the fall, getting ready for the season. I went up in the summer, tried to take a class, and then also just work out with the football guys. And I met my wife, obviously, Catherine. I met her up there during that whole process and continued our relationship on from there. But it was a tough decision. And I just ultimately sat down and said, look, I said, baseball is what I want. The money was great, but the money wasn't going to be an issue because I felt like if you made the major league level, you can make some money there. The minor leagues, you don't make anything hardly. So I just said, I'm ready to start, living out my dream and try to work my way to the major league level. And I just couldn't pass it up. And anybody and everybody have asked me, hey, do you second guess yourself? And I'm saying absolutely not. Whether I was able to be a part of a World Series champion or not, I look at it as saying, you know what, I got to play at the highest level in baseball. Not a lot of people get the opportunity to say that. I was very blessed to have those opportunities. And, and right now I'm just someone that says, hey, look, if you play with me for my, little league teams or travel ball teams, not only am I going to try to teach you and push you to compete at your highest level,
yep,
but whatever I've learned, I'm going to pass it on to you, and hopefully in some way, shape, or form it helps you, whether it's on a baseball field or in a classroom or just in everyday life.